Today we cover some basic faith-related questions. Why are churches so against transgender people? Are we wrong to support them? Does God ask us to support trans people in our community? And are we just listening to false doctrine? You know what false doctrine is? It's man-made religion parading as requirements from God. It's traditions of men that line the pockets of the leaders but leave everyone else, especially the vulnerable, out to dry. Our transgender friends, family, and loved ones are hurting right now, and we need to speak up, stand up, come alongside them, and sometimes step in front of them to take some of the arrows coming their way.
Would it be okay if I were to tell you that I am afraid someday, so I call you up and you call me down? Would it be okay?
Well, hello and welcome to the FreedHearts podcast. My name is Robert Cottrell, and I'm here as always with
Susan Cottrell.
Hi there.
Hi.
How are you?
Great. How are you?
Good. How are you, everybody? We're so glad you're here. Welcome. Thanks for listening again. We really appreciate it. Maybe thanks for listening for the first time. If so, welcome to the family.
Welcome.
We appreciate it. Again, connect with us at freedhearts.org. That's where everything that we do has all the information there on our resources, on our Beloved Adventure courses, on your life coaching. Everything is right there. Check it out, freedhearts.org. All right, well, today we're going to cover some basic faith-related questions. Yay. Why are churches and a certain part of the culture out there, why, again, church-driven, are so against transgender and other LGBTQ people, and are we wrong to support them? Spoiler, no. Mm-hmm. Are we listening to, quote, false doctrine? Spoiler, no. Does God ask us to support trans people in our community? Spoiler, yeah. And just a reminder, we did several episodes on the transgender community, beautiful episodes about how the Bible affirms the trans community, the story from a mother of a transgender child, just amazing stories. Go back and listen to those and their podcast episodes from just a few months ago, I think. And you'll learn a whole lot more about this and discover they're great episodes. But today we want to focus on an email that you received, Susan, and how you answered that. So what I'm going to do is read the email and then you can go through your answer, yeah?
Yep.
Okay, so here we go. Here's the email that you received. Hi, Susan. Lately, I've been thinking about whether or not I am a false teacher because I posted some pro-LGBTQIA+ posts on my Instagram story and recently affirmed 2 moms of transgender kids. I also arranged a song of a mom's letter of support for her trans kid. An acquaintance from my conservative church responded to the Instagram story by saying, false doctrine. On Monday, I went to my church and the young adults sermon from a guest speaker was about being stable in an unstable world and false teachings. While the speaker did not say anything about anti-LGBTQIA+, he did take a swipe at deconstruction. I guess why I feel conflicted and stuck is because I find the timing of the sermon to be unsettling. I'm unsure whether the Holy Spirit is convicting me of my pro-LGBTQIA+, pro-women pastor, pro-deconstruction stances, or if it was just a coincidence, or if I'm just trying to avoid repenting by justifying my beliefs. When I was younger, I remember when I was doubting whether Christianity was true, and then the sermon at my church a few weeks later, after I had a conversation with someone about my doubt, was on doubt and faith. Since the timing of the sermon was odd, I never told anyone else about the doubt, and I don't think the person told the pastor since he also appeared surprised at the timing. I thought that was the Holy Spirit confirming that he was still there to believe in. That was a wonderful experience, and I felt it right away. Since I felt and still feel very conflicted during this false doctrine sermon, and not instantly good, I am unsure whether it was the Holy Spirit. I know the fruits of the Spirit include love, joy, peace, kindness, goodness, etc., but the Spirit also convicts. The thing is, I don't think I could ever go back to a non-affirming position. It does not sit right with me anymore. I just can't even imagine God saying, especially to a trans kid and their mom, that they were not acceptable to him, and that they needed to depart from his presence. I would want to hold their hands tight, advocate for them like a lawyer in front of God, and give them a big hug. I would rather die so they could go to heaven instead of me. I don't think they deserve punishment. I often wonder, why does God care so much about whether people are perfectly masculine or feminine? Why does it matter that they are cisgender? I guess why I feel so much about this is because I have a disability. My mom has been there for me since I was young and has always been my advocate. She taught me how to advocate for myself and my needs. I am who I am because of her and her love. I resonate with the experiences of trans kids and their moms because I think it's very similar to the disability experience. I notice how parents of kids with disabilities get so much love from the church, since Jesus directly affirms them, but families with trans kids get the opposite. It's not fair, and our gay, lesbian, and queer friends who have suffered through conversion therapy, including celibacy and no marriage, which I've read can be fatal in some cases, also get this response. I know that the passages about same-sex behavior in the Bible are all taught as negative, but there is context and mistranslations behind them that I think are important to acknowledge. And with all the love the secular community shows LGBTQIA plus people, their approach just feels right to me, even though what feels right may not always be true. I love how our secular friends fully love unabashedly and unapologetically. I wish Christians could too. But then again, even if God were to say LGBTQIA plus people are fully okay with him, I would assume it's too good to be true. Ugh. Mm-hmm. My core fear seems to be, if I believe and spread false doctrine, will God revoke my salvation just for that? That doesn't seem fair at all. But the Bible does seem to say that false prophets lead themselves and others to hell. So I'm stuck. I've read the descriptions of false prophets in the Bible, and I don't think I meet most of the definitions. But the evangelical church has deeply programmed this worry in me and others. So that's the email. Boy, there's just so much to unpack there.
So much.
So much to unpack. These could be multiple episodes, but how did you answer?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this is so rich with things to talk about. And I think the last bit summed it up when she said, I don't fit those definitions of false prophets, but the evangelical church has programmed this into my head. That's exactly right. You know the famous saying, there's nothing to fear but fear itself. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's nothing to fear from God, nothing to fear from God. It's only God's bouncers that you have to watch out for.
God's self-appointed bouncers.
Yes, who claim to speak for God, that God will whack your knuckles and terrify you, will beat you into submission. That is not from God. Mm-hmm. That's not from God, but it is deeply conditioned into us. So what are we called to? That's exactly the right question. We who love goodness and mercy, we who advocate for the least of these, well, that's exactly what we're called to do, is to love like that, to advocate for the very people you're advocating for. So let's start with your mother and her protection of you. And I'm speaking this to the email writer here, but I'm also speaking to you, all of you, however it applies to you. Think of this mother's protection. Isn't that what we should be doing for the least of these?
Yeah, can you define the least of these for me?
Yeah, that's it, the least resourced, the least visible, the least powerful.
Okay.
That's what Jesus talked about, told us to defend these people, the most vulnerable. Of course, that's what we should be doing. Those are the ones Jesus said to love and help and advocate for. And you pointed out in this letter that some people with challenges are wholly embraced and some are woefully rejected. And that's all based on church, not on Jesus, not on God. The culture's view is immeasurably impacted by the church. The rules church loves to say they're not swayed by the whims of the culture. They stick with God. That is so false. What they stick with is, in fact, their own set of rules.
Which changes often. Right.
Yeah. Do you remember when divorce was completely off the table? And then so many people got divorced, including religious leaders, pastors, that now,
Right.
they're good with it.
Right. I mean, that's one thing that infuriates me. One of many things right now that infuriate me. But this whole narrative that they say, well, you're just being swayed by the culture. No, it's the church that has always been swayed by the culture.
Yes. Yes. That's
Whatever
right.
works, whatever is a good enemy, whatever is the appropriate, effective them at this point, the church goes with. We're not the ones who are swayed.
Right. The church never felt about LGBTQ people, especially, I guess, trans people, as vehemently as they feel today. It just,
Right.
yeah, you know what I'm saying. What they stick with, in fact, is their own set of rules. And that's what Jesus called the traditions of men. He said, you cancel the direct commandment of God for the sake of your own tradition. You hypocrites. Isaiah was right when he prophesied about you, that these people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. Their worship is a farce, for they teach man-made ideas as commands from God.
Wow, that's so powerful.
So powerful, so true. And I don't recall that ever being taught in any of the churches we ever went to.
Well, it was talking about the heretics.
Yes. Yes.
You know what I mean? It was twisted.
Yes.
To not talk about religious leaders,
Yes.
but those who would question the church.
Yes. Yes. What direct commandment of God do these traditions cancel? To love each other, protect each other, especially protect those who are vulnerable, to protect them from those who would exploit them. These religious leaders are doing the exact opposite of God's direct command. That's astoundingly bad news for everyone subject to the religious leaders. It's astoundingly bad news for LGBTQ people who've been demonized falsely. It's astoundingly bad news for women who've been treated as deformed men, which is how the New Testament culture saw them. It's astoundingly bad news for Black people whom religious leaders have enslaved with their pulpit teaching about white supremacy, saying God demands them to serve their masters and teaching that whites are supreme. All of this is false doctrine. You asked about false doctrine. Traditions of men are false doctrine. Traditions of men are human-made, really, they're man-made, religion, parading as requirements from God. And there's a phrase around all of this, and it's the lens through which we are meant to read the Bible. It's called preferential option for the poor. This means that Christians are called to look at the world from the perspective of the marginalized and to work with them to create justice for them. The preferential option is for the poor, for those most vulnerable. That's the whole point.
There's a great quote from James Baldwin, which says, if one really wishes to know how justice is administered in a country or church, one does not question the policemen, the lawyers, the judges, or the protected members of the middle class. One goes to the unprotected, those precisely who need the law's protection most, and listens to their testimony.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Every time you read the word righteousness, by the way, in the Bible, you should instantly translate it to the word justice, because that's what it means, and that's a much better translation, because it carries the meaning of justice for the vulnerable, whereas righteousness easily sounds like self-righteousness, which is how it's taught and internalized,
Yes.
which is the opposite. That's the opposite of justice. So Christians are called to look at the world from the perspective of the marginalized and to work with them to create justice. Who did Jesus get furious at? Religious leaders and political leaders who exploit the poor and underempowered for their own wealth and their own power. The framing for every word we read in the Bible should be, how does this affect the vulnerable? Who's going to suffer because of this inequity, this law that's being passed, and how can we make it just? If we did that, that would change everything.
That's good.
If the leadership did that, that would change everything.
Well, if the public would do that.
Yes, yes. And in this case, trans people are the ones being singled out to be persecuted. They're vulnerable. Christians are called to look at the world from the perspective of trans people and to work to make the world safer for them to live in. That's what justice means, to make the world just for everyone. We're told not to judge them, that judging is not our role. Jesus made that clear. And if someone doesn't get being trans, which I understand that, not getting it, I understand that, but I do get it. And I don't know why. It's probably because I've listened to them and I can put myself in their place, but some people don't get it. And that's okay. Does that matter? No. Do they need to get it? No. But I don't get the Black experience either. I haven't been in those shoes of being afraid that anybody comes up might hurt me because it's happened so many times. But I know they haven't been treated justly. And we know trans people have not been treated justly. So you don't really have to be especially insightful to understand this. You just have to look and listen and open your eyes and ears to the stories that they share, as this letter writer has been doing, paying attention and saying, that doesn't seem right. That response doesn't seem right. That's exactly right. And whether it's trans people or #MeToo people or children or others who are being abused, and we need to be able to hear and see and say, no, that's not right. The treatment is not right. So
yeah, I think we can. I think sometimes the church, the political culture, the narrative out there is meant to whip people up into a frenzy.
Yes.
About stuff that they haven't thought through.
Yes.
And if they just take a moment to think through it.
And they don't want them to think through it. This
No.
woman is thinking through this. And they don't like that, because then you're going to come to a different conclusion than the one they told you to come to.
Yeah.
And they're not interested in anyone not complying.
All right.
So here's a challenge to help you make sense of all this. Ask the Holy Spirit to show you truth. You said when you were younger, writing this email, you were doubting if Christianity was true, and then the Spirit seemed to confirm that it was true. Yay! I love those moments of clarity from Spirit, and I think many of our listeners have had that experience. I know I have, multiple times. So ask Spirit. Jesus said she would lead us in all truth. And yes, the Spirit's pronouns in the original are she, her, so there you are. So let her show you what's the truth here.
Okay, I need to ask something here, because I've said that, and we've said that a lot before, and I had someone who I said that to recently write back and say, okay, I did. I asked the Spirit, and they said you were wrong. Mm-hmm. And the Spirit confirmed that I was right and that you were wrong in your stance. So thank you for asking me to confirm in the Spirit. I now stand sure that you're wrong and I'm right.
Yeah.
So how do you respond when someone says, well, I did ask the Spirit and they showed me this?
Yeah. Well, it's a really good question. So let me address it. But I'm going to first say that most of the time, I don't get that. Even my close relatives, I asked that, and they did not say, I asked the Spirit.
Yeah, they wouldn't answer. No.
They didn't answer that directly.
Yeah.
And if you're going to ask that question, and then if they're gonna lie about it, I'm not saying the person's lying, I'll get to that. But if they're gonna lie about it, well, now they're lying with the Holy Spirit. So that's on them.
Well, there has to be a way to discern if what's coming from the Holy Spirit is truth or not.
Yes. And I think the Holy Spirit speaks truth to us by our deep sense in our gut. That's been my experience. Mm. And this email writer said that when Spirit confirmed in her faith that it was a wonderful experience and she felt it right away. The Holy Spirit feels like that, feels like life, like love, not judgment and condemnation.
Yeah. If the Holy Spirit is I think if the Holy Spirit is saying things that sound very much like the judgmental, condemning traditions of men that you're hearing from the pastors or from the church teaching, that's probably not the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Because that's the other part of it is that when we plumb the depths, we're going to ping on that conditioning pretty regularly. I think I've told you this, that when we went back and watched Glee, I went back and watched Glee with the kids from long before. We watched Glee long before the kids came out, or somewhat before.
The TV show Glee.
The TV show. And so I was still in my, being gay is not quite right mindset based on ignorance. And when the show came on, it like pinged that part of me again. And I thought, what? That's not true. I don't believe that at all anymore. But it goes back to that conditioning. Our conditioning is so deep. And so it's very easy for it to ping into your fear.
Yeah.
And that's the other part with this, your person that you mentioned. I don't know what, I'm not talking to her right now, so I don't know what she would say, but I do know that it's very easy to get pulled in by the fear. Like this writer said, is this just like you're thrown into fear? Fear is so easy to be thrown into.
Yeah.
And the more grounded you are and the more you know who you are, the less that fear can just swipe your legs out from under you, because you know what you know.
You talk about being grounded and kind of being older, more mature. Is there a like a different way to phrase the question to the Holy Spirit, a different way to kind of reach out to the Holy Spirit and ask that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think so. I think you can just say, tell me more about what is true. Tell me more, what part of this is true? What part is traditions of men? Because the biggest traditions of men, besides constantly securing their own wealth and power, is to make believe that you have to take all of it or you get none of it. So, there's no line item rejection for you in what they give you. But if you ask questions of the Holy Spirit, you can say, what part of this is what is true and what part isn't true? If you ask the religious leaders, they'll say you're questioning God. Don't, and they want you just to believe it wholesale. But which is very convenient, isn't it? Because that seals every exit.
Yeah.
So get in a conversation. If the Spirit says like this, your person said, well, confirmed, say, but these people seem to be really hurting, and this doctrine seems to be hurting them. Tell me more about that. Like press in to find out. But if your answer comes up with love and affirmation and your spirit kind of releases into it, that's the Holy Spirit. If it comes up with angst, I wanted to love these people, but the Holy Spirit said I can't. I wanted to embrace them, but the Holy Spirit said I can't.
That doesn't sound right. Yeah.
If it creates angst in you like that, then that's not the Holy Spirit. That's your conditioning.
That's good.
So I hope that makes sense of that for people.
Yeah. Thanks.
So
what is false doctrine?
Yes, because she asked that in the letter. It's everything we just talked about. It's the traditions of men that line the pockets of the leaders, but leave everyone else, especially the vulnerable, out to dry. Those are traditions of men. She asked very tenderly if God could revoke her salvation for supporting LGBTQ people. That doesn't seem fair at all. That's right. It doesn't seem fair because it's not fair and it's not true. The answer is absolutely not. But let's set aside the phrase revoke your salvation. That is literally a whole other episode, which I'm happy to do if people want it. But for now, let's go back to this, back down just a little bit and say, does God want you to support LGBTQ people? Or is your support against God's desire for you? So I would ask, do you think God does not want you to love and help vulnerable people like Jesus asked you instead of condemning, as the church asks? And you can see that we've already answered that question. The question comes from fear that is deeply programmed into us. It's programmed in on purpose to keep us dependent, not on God, who said Jesus wants us to love, who Jesus said wants us to love and protect the vulnerable and embrace them, but to keep us dependent on religious leaders and on the traditions of men.
You know, I just had this thought that to say to somebody out there that, you know, be afraid if you don't judge people like we've taught you to.
Right.
Well, whose fear are we focused on then? It's your fear.
Yes.
Versus be afraid for the vulnerable if we don't love them and support them like we should.
Yes.
Where's the fear focused on? It's their fear.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's what the vulnerable are afraid of.
That's a really, really good point.
You know?
It's a really good point. Yeah. That line of reasoning is saying, don't give a crap about other people.
Yeah, be focused on your fear.
You focus on your fear so that you're safe. You be sure you're safe.
Right. Not that they're
and
safe.
To hell with everybody else, literally.
And all that fear is programmed into people, and it's control and
it is
manipulation and keep people giving and in the pews and dependent. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, imagine two toddlers, and one of them helps the other one, and in the process, they both fall out of their chairs. And you're like, well, you shouldn't have tried to help him. Look what happened. No, God, no. You'd say, thank you for trying to help. Thank you. Let me help you both.
Yeah, right.
That's just fear mongering.
Yeah.
And that fear is programmed into you like waves on the sea crashing around you, and you think you're going to drown. And if you dive under the fear and take your little submersible deep under the water, you'll find it's peaceful. That you'll see the panorama of God's creation that you don't otherwise see because it's under the sea. And instead, all the clamor of voices and chaos, that's all on top. That's where the chaos is. But down below, you're in the sea, in the beauty and the life. Is that a good visual? Anyway, deeply programmed means it will take some time to dive under. But you know that the Spirit leads you in all truth. You know the Spirit. Let her resonate inside you. Fear is not spirit. Press into that Spirit who has already led you in truth so many times. Not church that's gotten wrong so many times. And what does your heart say? The heart is a very good gauge for what's good and what's true when we're not listening to the fear, when we bypass the fear. That's why we have the ability to feel so strongly in our heart about all this. It's our BS meter. And the first thing someone who wants to control you will try to do is to silence your BS meter. That's the deep conditioning to get you to stop trusting your own heart, where the Holy Spirit speaks, so that you'll trust them instead. Now, I'll tell you right now, that's a bad deal. So reframe false doctrine as traditions of men who want to control you, and reframe gospel as astoundingly good news for the vulnerable. And that will get you a long way.
That's so good. That's so good. Beloved, if you have questions like this, hurdles that you're having trouble getting past, please just email us, podcast@freedhearts.org, and we'll answer the question. And again, don't let it stick in there. Just go ahead and email us.
Yeah.
We'd love to interact with you. Something that we've said in a meme recently and often is that if you don't understand why your transgender friend is really scared right now, you don't have a trans friend, you know a trans person. Beloved, we need to speak up and stand up and come alongside and sometimes step in front to take some of the arrows coming their way. It's time. And the time is now, and there's never been a more important time than right now. We need to do that. Beloved, we will be here next week. We love you dearly, as always, and we
love
will
you dearly.
Be here next week. We love you. We'll see you then.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Would it be okay if I were to tell you that I am afraid someday? So I call you up and you call me down. Would it be okay?
You've been listening to the FreedHearts podcast. We have extensive resources and vibrant, inclusive community for you at freedhearts.org. Please just come say hello. If you have questions, comments, or suggestions for the podcast, just email us at podcast@freedhearts.org. Audio engineering is provided by Luke Johnson. The music is provided by our daughter, Hannah Cottrell, who is Grammy nominated. You can find out more about her and her music at hannahcottrell.com. Please share, subscribe, and follow on your favorite platform, and support us if you can. Thanks for listening.
Would it be okay?